Welcome back to the West Virginia Media Lab podcast.
Oh, it's good to be back.
Tonight we're diving into some of those cryptid encounters from our latest Scary Stories episode. If you missed it, you can find a link to the full episode down in the description. West Virginia seems to have it all when it comes to these mysterious beings. But are these stories real, or are they just really good campfire tales?
Well, what's fascinating about them is how they tap into that deep fascination we have with the unknown. They really make you question everything you think you know about nature and the world around us. It's like they're pushing the limits of what we can even perceive.
Yeah, and each one is so vivid, so detailed. It's easy to get caught up in the thrill of not knowing for sure. Like take that Bigfoot story, for instance. This hiker named Henry, he described this intense smell, like wet fur and rotting meat hitting him even before he saw anything.
Oh, wow. Talk about setting the scene.
Right. Total sensory overload. And then that feeling of being watched, like the whole forest was holding its breath.
I get chills just thinking about it. That sense of an unseen presence is so common in these cryptid stories. It plays on our deepest fears, you know?
Yeah.
That primal fear of being hunted by something we can't even see.
Totally. And then, of course, the sound. He described it as this guttural growl, something deep and primal. Definitely not your average forest creature.
Definitely not. And this Bigfoot wasn't just hiding in the shadows either.
Right. Henry said it was like 8 feet tall with these burning eyes reflecting the moonlight. And get this, it actually made it sound like it was trying to speak.
Whoa, hold on. Attempts at communication. That's where things get really interesting. It suggests a level of intelligence that blurs the line between animal instinct and something more, something sentient almost. Makes you wonder, what are they trying to say?
Exactly.
Okay,
next up we had the Sheepsquatch. And this thing sounds straight out of a nightmare. Imagine this hulking creature covered in white fur with horns like a mountain goat. But here's the creepy part. It has this unsettlingly human-like face, fixed in this permanent grin.
That's just disturbing. The Sheepsquatch is a perfect example of how these cryptid descriptions often blend familiar animal features, but in a way that makes them both recognizable and totally alien. And that grin, that adds a whole other layer of psychological complexity. It's not just a wild animal. It suggests intelligence, even malice.
Right. Two guys, Carter and Eli, they were searching for their missing hunting dogs in this place called Dagger Hollow when they encountered this creature. And it didn't just observe them, it actually hunted them, charging through the undergrowth like a freight train.
So it's not just passive, it's aggressive. Makes you wonder what's driving that aggression. Is it territorial, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, they only managed to escape by crossing a river, which according to Eli, the Sheepsquatch refused to cross.
Why would a creature avoid water like that? It's like there's another layer of mystery to the whole thing.
Right. It could be a genuine fear of water. Or maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's tied to some local folklore or belief.
Maybe. You know, those details often point to a connection between the cryptids and the environment it inhabits.
Okay, so we've talked about Bigfoot and the Sheepsquatch. But now let's move on to something a little different. The Snallygaster. This one is like something out of medieval folklore. A winged, scaly beast with the tentacled maw and razor-sharp talons. It supposedly haunts this abandoned coal town called Black Hollow, which already has its own spooky history. So two guys, Jason and Mason, they went exploring there looking for some thrills, but they got way more than they bargained for when the Snallygaster swooped down and snatched Mason right off his feet.
Wow, talk about a close encounter. The Snallygaster is so interesting because its description is so overtly monstrous. Like, it brings to mind dragons and other mythical creatures. It's almost like a manifestation of our deepest fears. And the fact that it's associated with an abandoned town adds to that mystique. You know, those places are often steeped in history, tragedy, even resentment. It's like a breeding ground for dark legends.
Yeah, and this legend almost turned deadly. Luckily, Jason managed to save Mason by luring the Snallygaster into an old mine and setting it on fire.
Yeah.
But as they escaped, they could hear its muffled screech from deep within the collapsed mine.
Oh my gosh. So did they destroy it or just contain it?
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's that lingering question that really gets you. It leaves you wondering if the danger is truly gone or if it's just waiting to resurface.
Right. And it makes you think about how these stories, whether real or not, can tap into our fears in such a powerful way.
All right, from fire-breathing monsters, let's switch gears to something a little different. We're moving from the land to the sky with the Mothman. You've probably heard of this one. A huge, shadowy figure with massive, glowing red eyes, and a wingspan that some say is wider than a car. What makes these Mothman stories so creepy is that it's often seen before disasters. almost like a harbinger of doom.
It's like a warning sign, almost supernatural. The Mothman is fascinating because it blends folklore with modern anxieties. It has roots in those older stories of winged creatures and omens, but it also appeared at a time when people were really starting to worry about technological disasters and big societal changes.
Right? Like the world was on the brink of something. And this story from West Virginia Media Lab's Scary Stories takes place in an abandoned factory, a place that's already filled with a sense of decay and unease. Two guys, Ethan and Joel, they were exploring this factory, and they started to feel this overwhelming dread, like something was watching them. Then they saw them. Two massive, burning red orbs blinking in the darkness above.
That's spooky. The setting itself plays a huge role in these stories. Abandoned structures, places where things have gone wrong, where people have experienced loss or trauma. They amplify those feelings of fear and uncertainty. It makes you wonder if the environment itself somehow contributes to these experiences.
It's like the place is haunted by more than just memories. So Ethan and Joel, they see these eyes, and then the Mothman unfolds from the rafters, landing with this deafening clang. It didn't attack them, but it made this low, warbling sound that they said vibrated in their bones.
Talk about unsettling. That's a classic element of the Mothman mythos. The association with destruction and collapse. It taps into our fear of the unknown, but also those anxieties about the fragility of our own civilization.
Right. Like, what if these creatures, these anomalies, are signs that something bigger is coming? Something darker.
It's a chilling thought.
Okay, enough with the sky. Let's get back down to Earth, or rather, into the water, with the Grafton Monster. This thing is truly bizarre. Picture this. A massive hulking form, smooth, pale skin, powerful shoulders, but no head. Just a blank space where its head should be.
That's creepy. A creature with no face. The Grafton Monster's lack of a head is such a striking detail. It makes it almost impossible to even imagine what it could be. It defies our expectations of what a creature should look like, and that just adds to its uncanny and unsettling nature.
Definitely. So two guys, Caleb and Mason, they encountered this creature on the Tigard River. It was a foggy night, and they heard this heavy breathing, then a splash. The fog parted just enough for them to see this massive form rising from the water. And of course, it lunged at their boat.
Water already holds so much mystery for us humans. It's the realm of the unknown, what lies beneath the surface. And fog amplifies that feeling. It obscures details, distorts shapes, makes the familiar seem alien. It creates the perfect conditions for these encounters, where our imaginations can run wild.
And in this case, their imaginations weren't too far off. Mason actually fired his gun, but it didn't stop the creature. Their boat nearly capsized as it reached for them with a massive hand. Luckily, they managed to escape. But as they paddled back to shore, the fog shifted, revealing the Grafton Monster standing on the bank watching them.
It let them go, but it was watching. That's another common motif in cryptid stories, the watching. It suggests an intelligence and awareness of the fear it has instilled. Almost like it's saying, I let you go this time.
Okay, we've encountered some pretty freaky creatures so far, but buckle up, because we're about to dive into some truly terrifying territory. Let's talk about the devil dogs. These aren't your average neighborhood pups. Imagine massive black spectral dogs with glowing red eyes and a hunger for, well, let's just say they're not exactly friendly.
Spectral dogs. And that brings a whole other dimension to the discussion. Are we talking about physical creatures or something more ethereal, something supernatural? This blurs the lines between cryptids and the realm of ghosts and spirits.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of creepiness. So our witness, Matt, was driving down this deserted back road, and he noticed how quiet everything had become. No crickets, no wind, just this unsettling silence. And then he saw them, these shapes moving in the trees flanking his truck, those glowing eyes keeping pace with him.
Oh man, that sudden silence, the absence of natural sounds. It's like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen.
Right, and then came the howls.
Yeah.
Not like any dog or wolf Matt had ever heard. Deep hollow, almost human.
Almost human. Yeah. That's what really separates these creatures from regular animals. It suggests something more intelligent, more deliberate.
And these devil dogs were relentless. They chased Matt's truck. One even jumped onto the roof, scratching at the metal with its claws. He slammed on his brakes, throwing it off, but they kept coming. He finally managed to outrun them, but not before they lined up in the road, watching him go as if to say, we'll be seeing you again.
That's terrifying, that image of them watching him go. It implies a level of control, a sense of dominance, like they let him escape, but they made sure he knew they were in charge.
Definitely not something you want to run into on a deserted road. Okay, last but not least, we're diving into the Monongahela River with the Ogua. This thing is described as having a thick, jagged shell, a long, muscular tail, and a gaping, beaked maw. It's like a prehistoric monster straight out of a nightmare.
It sounds terrifying. The Ogua's description really evokes a sense of deep time, like these ancient creatures that have survived for millennia hidden in the depths.
Right. It makes you wonder what else might be lurking down there. Two guys, Cody and Jake, they were fishing on the river when the dock suddenly groaned beneath them. Then they heard this heavy thud, like something massive hitting the wood, and then the river just exploded. This enormous creature surged from the depths, sending water crashing everywhere.
Wow, that sudden eruption from the water, it reminds us of the power and unpredictability of nature. We think we're in control, but then something like this happens. And it shows us that we're really at the mercy of forces much greater than ourselves.
And in this case, those forces were pretty terrifying. Jake ran for his life, but Cody wasn't so lucky. The dock gave way and he plunged into the icy water. He saw the Ogua's shadow moving toward him, its tail whipping through the water.
Oh no.
He thought he was done for, but Jake managed to pull him to safety just in time.
That's a close call. The fact that they survived being in the creature's element makes you wonder about its intentions. Was it really attacking? Or was it just curious? Or even defensive?
We may never know, but the experience definitely leaves a lingering sense of unease. A reminder that we share this world with creatures we may never fully understand.
Creatures that lurk in the shadows and the depths.
So we've journeyed through the forests, the skies, and the rivers of West Virginia, encountering a whole menagerie of fascinating and sometimes terrifying creatures. Each story, whether you believe it or not, taps into something deep within us. Our fascination with the unknown, our fear of the dark, and our desire to make sense of a world that can often feel unpredictable and dangerous.
Absolutely. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Are these creatures real, or are they just elaborate stories that we tell ourselves to cope with the mysteries of the world?
So what do you think, listeners, real? Or are they just products of our imaginations? We've heard some pretty wild stories, some from multiple witnesses, but is that enough to say these creatures are real?
Well, eyewitness accounts are a good place to start. But we have to consider other factors too, like perception memory, the influence of existing stories and folklore.
Yeah, it's like if you're already expecting to see Bigfoot in the woods, you're more likely to think every weird sound or shadow is him.
Exactly. It's called confirmation bias. We tend to see what we want to see, what we're already primed to believe. But that doesn't automatically mean all these stories are made up. Some of them do have a ring of authenticity, a level of detail that goes beyond simple imagination.
Okay, but what about physical evidence? Footprints, hair samples, anything concrete like that? I haven't heard much about that.
That's the thing about cryptids. Solid evidence is really hard to come by. They're often described as elusive, solitary creatures, rarely leaving behind clear traces.
So we're left with these amazing stories and a ton of questions. It's almost like the more we learn about cryptids, the less we actually know.
I think that's part of the appeal. It keeps us guessing, keeps that sense of wonder alive. We may never have absolute proof, but that doesn't mean we should stop searching. We should keep exploring, investigating, questioning.
So what's the takeaway here? Should we believe in these creatures or just dismiss them as fantasy?
I don't think it's about picking one side or the other. It's about embracing that gray area, that space between belief and skepticism. It's about recognizing the limits of what we know and being open to the possibility that there's still so much out there we don't understand.
So it's okay to be a little skeptical and a little bit of a believer at the same time.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to approach this whole topic. When it comes to cryptids, it's all about the mystery, the intrigue, the what-ifs, keeping an open mind and never losing that sense of childlike wonder.
This deep dive has definitely given me more questions than answers. But in a good way, it's made me really curious, and I want to learn more about these creatures and the stories they inspire.
And that's the goal, isn't it? To spark that curiosity in others, to get people thinking, questioning, exploring, and always searching for answers.
Totally. So to everyone listening out there, keep an open mind, keep exploring, and never stop questioning what's possible. Because in this world, anything could be out there.
You never know. Maybe one day you'll have your own cryptid encounter.
If you enjoyed these cryptid encounters, be sure to check out the full episode of our Scary Stories segment. You can find a link in the description. And as always, thanks for listening to the West Virginia Media Lab podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. The West Virginia Media Lab is all about celebrating our state and its people, businesses, stories, news, and folklore. If you love West Virginia like we do, be sure to comment below, then subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to stay connected. Until next time, Stay wild, wonderful, West Virginia.